This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donnelly, an associate of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jerry Strittmatter. Jerry is pinch hitting for Charlie, who remains on assignment. He's been very busy lately.
Oh yeah, it'll be very interesting to hear.
What he's been up to.
What he's learned.
What he's learned. What he's been up to.
Yes.
But it's very nice to have you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
We are very fortunate to have the relatively new State Director of NFIB in Pennsylvania, Greg Moreland.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to have you here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Since you're new and you're new to our viewers, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to NFIB?
Sure. I got educated at Penn State University, got my master's degree in public administration, started out in the House Research Department, did Transportation Committee and Labor and Industry Committee, moved up to become the policy advisor to Speaker of the House Mike Turzai, and then was fortunate enough to move over when my friend Senator Dave Arnold from Lebanon County got elected to the Pennsylvania Senate, moved over there to be his chief of staff, but unfortunately he passed away due to a health issue in January of 2021, and so I'm here now. It's been on board since about May, and happy to represent our small business community.
Well, that's great. We are very concerned about our small businesses right now, as everybody is. We've got a lot to talk about. Tell me, in general terms, how are small businesses feeling about things, about the economy?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Small businesses have really suffered over the past 2 years. About 24 months now. We're about 24 months into 15 days to flatten the curve. So, they've been dealing with all of these issues head on from day one, with the government shutdown of their businesses if they were deemed to be non-life essential. And so they've had to struggle to get their workers to come back to the workforce. We're now dealing with, record inflation rates. Businesses continue to have record high levels of having open positions, but the inability of qualified individuals to fill those positions. So supply chain disruptions, empty shelves, having to figure out what it's going to take to get workers back to their business so that they can open full time, back to the hours of pre-COVID and back to the levels of pre-COVID, because I think what you're seeing is that our businesses are still not back to their pre-pandemic levels for their revenues, and ultimately at the end of the day, if they're not getting the money then into their business, they have a hard time increasing pay or offering better opportunities for their
to attract
employees.
People, right?
So it's kind of a catch-22. So they're still struggling, but they've been very resilient over the past 2 years, and we'll continue to push forward.
Oh yeah, they need to be commended. All businesses, but especially small businesses, because you had to take a look at that and then figure out, well, how are we going to survive? So you came up, purchase at the curb, and we'll deliver. Yeah. And we'll do things outside. And so they've been so resilient and
creative.
Really allowed us, in spite of the bad government decisions against them, they've been wonderful. So we're really hoping for a big bounce back, and that's why with our viewers watching that shop at all the small businesses, what would you like the viewers to know about your members?
Yeah, well, there is an inherent difference between large businesses and small businesses. I think that became aware, that became more prevalent, as the shutdown back in March of 2020 came out, and Lowe's and Home Depot were open, but John's hardware store down the street was closed, and people started to question why. Why is that? When we're looking at the things that legislators are doing here in Harrisburg, or proposals that are coming out, it's often critical that legislators fully understand what the differences between large and small businesses are. Our small businesses, our average membership is less than 10 employees. Less than 10 employees. So when we say that NFIB is the voice of small business, we truly mean it. You know, our leadership council is comprised of members that have very small companies. And they know how much time regulations take, how much, you know, this minor tweak to a tax, you know, code has on the individual. We don't have, our members don't have, you know, many times in-house attorneys, in-house accountants, an HR department, many of those technical expertises that large corporations have. So any requirements on them is a monumental feat. It takes time and it takes energy. When you're looking at taxes and just filing taxes, you know, about 35% of our membership spend more than 40 hours a year just on filing taxes. That's a whole entire work week that business owner can't spend putting their face forward at their business to grow their business and to treat their employees the way they need to be treated and to provide them the benefits to make their business attractable. So there are inherent differences between large and small business, and the economies of scale are very real.
So the in your latest economic trends survey, almost 50% of your respondents have open positions. That's pretty significant. I mean, we keep hearing about the Great Resignation. We keep hearing that people can't attract. And where are all these people? And when are they coming back to the workforce?
That is an excellent
They
question.
were here at one point, but are they coming back? When are they coming back?
You know, I think they eventually will. I think what we've seen is that workers now have the upper hand. And it's the first time in my lifetime.
They're being very demanding.
Yes, it's the first time in my lifetime that I've witnessed workers being able to kind of pick and choose and pit one employer against another. You know, our employers have done really everything they possibly can to become more attractive to potential employees. 83% of our employers increased wages, 24% increased paid time off, 20% increased or enhanced hiring bonuses, 24% offered enhanced referral bonuses, 29% offered enhanced healthcare insurance benefits. They are really trying to do everything they possibly can. Our small business owners would love to be able to throw all of the benefits possibly available at all of their employees. But you have to remember, they have to turn a profit in their business to sustain, to be able to have those jobs. So, you know, I think workers have become really picky in what it is that they would like to do. I think many have gone from, you know, that restaurant industry where there's no predictable schedule. You may have to work evenings, weekends, mornings, lunchtime. You know, you don't necessarily know exactly at the end of the week what your pay is going to be every single week. It's a tough industry to work in. And I think many workers, when they were laid off from that industry, went back to the drawing board, talked to their families, talked to their spouses about what it is that they desire in life.
A lot of them went back to school, online courses, you know. I mean, and God love them. They're seeking to better their position, and so you cannot fault a lot of them for just trying to create a better life for themselves if they can.
They're making rational decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in that case, I'm sure the General Assembly wants to help, and when they view this, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, we better be doing something."
Sure.
And so, what are those things that you feel that would allow the workers to get more from the businesses if the businesses were relieved of certain regulations, certain laws, certain reporting requirements? What are some of those that our viewers should be talking to their legislators and senators and the governor about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it all starts with government has become bloated. I think we can all recognize that the spending limits that our government, it just increases every single year. It doesn't need to increase. I think House Bill 71 is a good start, the Taxpayer Protection Act. I think that, that would put constitutional limits on the amount that could be raised in spending each year. I think that we could look at the tax code. I think our tax code is unattractive to small businesses. It does not encourage risk. It does not encourage our small employers or entrepreneurs to go out, take that risk, because starting a business at the end of the day is a huge risk. It doesn't encourage them because they can't write off their net operating losses if they're a pass-through entity. We need to be looking at policies like that, removing the regulatory burden that is on many of our employers. We're one of the most regulated states. I believe the last time I checked, it was about 163,000 individual regulations on all business. I mean, that's about 162,000 regulations more than I think we need. Right. No, in serious though, I think Kristen Phillips Hill has the Office of the Repealer. We need to be looking at ways we can lessen the interference of government into our small businesses and into our business community. Look at rewriting the tax code, providing real tax relief. When you leave money in the pockets of small business owners, it's been proven that they reinvest those dollars back into their business, back into their employees, and grow our economy. And these businesses are the fabric of our communities. They are the lifeblood that keeps our economies going in many of our small towns. They're not the large multinational corporations that come into an area, use up all the resources, and then when you have nothing left to offer them, they leave.
Yeah. The small businesses that are out there that aren't able to be members yet, because they're struggling. So, but when they do, how do they find out how to become a member and how to fight more effectively? Like give us your webpage or your telephone numbers, or how would they go about that?
Sure. So they can check us out on the internet. We have an NFIB national page, but then we also have an NFIB specific Pennsylvania page that they can go to and get our news, events, data and information as far as what other members are saying. They have the opportunity to fill out a ballot once a year. We are a member driven. It's not me going into offices in Harrisburg and telling them what I think is right. We are member driven. We ballot our members and get positions directly from our membership, and those give us our talking points and priorities when we go across the street into the Capitol. So, I think for many of those small businesses that are frustrated still today, and they're looking for an organization that is willing to stand up against the government and stand up for the rights of small businesses to own, operate, and grow their business. I think joining an organization, an association like NFIB is a great opportunity for them to dip their toes into the political and policy world. And we want to hear from our members and other businesses, because there is no better story than the story of the small business owner when it comes to making policy over there and how it actually affects them in the real world. There's no better story than the story of the small business owner.
So in our last couple seconds here, we're heading into budget season here in Pennsylvania. You've mentioned regulations, you've mentioned taxes. What else will you be focused on with the General Assembly this budget season?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see next week with Governor Wolf's budget addresses is probably more of the same rhetoric that we've seen over the last 6-7 years. More taxation, more regulation, more driving up energy costs. So we're hopeful that that's what we don't see, but our expectations are we're being realistic about what we expect to see. I think there are some plans out there. Senator Ahmed has a couple plans to throw large dollar figures at small businesses through no interest grants. Or loans, but I think really at the end of the day, what our membership would like to see is net operating losses for small businesses and pass-through entities to allow them to take that hit in a year where they have suffered a loss. Where right now their corporate brothers and sisters are allowed to utilize net operating losses. Our small businesses are not allowed to. I think if we made that one change, we would make a generational change in our small business attractiveness of the Commonwealth.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being here with us today. We'd like to have you back, because when you're talking about economic trends, you have to stay on top of them. So
absolutely,
we'd like to do that for small business. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for a new segment of Behind the Headlines next.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back. On this segment, Jerry and I are very, very fortunate to have our State Treasurer with us. We'd like to welcome State Treasurer Stacy Garrity.
It's great to be with you, Maura and Jerry.
We have one particular issue we're going to talk about today, and the minute you say it out loud, my eyes glaze over because it sounds like an accounting thing. So I need you to help me and to help our readers understand, what is Ledger 5?
Ledger 5.
Ledger
Now,
5.
Doesn't that sound mysterious?
It does. It does. Scary and mysterious. Yes.
Right. So what Ledger 5, it's basically its accounting tool. And
It is accounting.
Yes,
so I was right
it is.
there.
You were
Okay,
right.
Okay.
So it's how the state tracks for non-budgeted expenditures, so during a fiscal year. So the basic rule in the state constitution is that the General Assembly has to appropriate funds before anything can be spent. But there are other provisions that make some exceptions, and those exceptions, they flow through Ledger 5. Okay? So now my view is that it's all taxpayer money, and taxpayers should be able to see how every single dollar is being spent. So what we did at Treasury is on our Treasury Transparency Portal, which is patreasury.gov, we set up another page called Ledger 5 to take this mystery out of it.
Okay.
Okay? And so people can go out to our portal, they can get on Ledger 5, and they can see anything that was spent that wasn't budgeted, didn't have an appropriation.
Okay, so let me ask you a basic question, though. If it wasn't appropriated, how can it be spent?
Okay, because I'll give you a very common example.
Okay.
Would be payments to nursing homes and hospitals. So
Okay.
it's usually DHS, so things that you really need to pay the bills, right? Because I think everybody would agree we need to pay our corrections officers, we need to pay our police.
Right.
So it's really things for public health and safety that we have to pay. So what happens is largely DHS will be a little bit underfunded, and so they'll know we have to make those payments anyway. So that's why we set up Ledger 5, so people can see exactly how every single one of their taxpayer dollars is being spent.
And when you look at it historically, because I know the federal government, through the COVID pandemic, gave excess dollars to the states.
They did.
Which it's a very good thing to have a rainy day fund, because we didn't want to have happen what happened before when it came to education, and people felt that, oh, you were underfunding education because it got cut back. No, because the federal government given extra money at that time in order to pay for education. Didn't want to have that happen again, which
Correct.
You and the General Assembly, that was being good stewards. But if we look at this, there won't be as much pressure on now because of having these excess dollars around, to do these appropriations. But when you looked at this in the past, what other kinds of things would have popped up besides now just this year with the health and welfare side of it? Were there other items that were on Ledger 5 in past years?
Well, I went back 9 years. So in 9 years, they've had a total of $2.5 billion on Ledger 5, okay? And of that $2.5 billion, $2.2 billion was Department of Human Services. So basically, $850 million just this past fiscal year. So FY 2021, it was almost all DHS.
So how well is this level of transparency being received?
So we met with all 4 caucuses,
Okay.
and everybody was in general very supportive of the increased transparency, as well as the governor's office. So the governor's office is now providing us more information that we're putting out on Ledger 5. So they're basically sending over exactly what the invoices for. So basically, you can get on Ledger 5 and you can click on the governor's memo from his budget secretary, and you'll see exactly what the dollars are for. So if you go out and look today, you'll see that there's over $600 million, and that was medical assistance payments. Okay, now I believe that that is just a lag that we will get reimbursed from the federal government, and so that may end up being washed out, but then you'll see it.
Then that's what I was going to ask you. Where would the money come from if, now this one will probably be reimbursed from the federal government, so it goes away. What about other expenditures? How do they get covered then? Do they become part of the next budget year's process, or what happens?
So what they do, and this is what I don't like. So in other words, so last year, this is an example, it was $850 million. So at the end of the year, the legislators vote on a supplemental appropriation. So basically, they voted in, okay?
Oh.
And what's bad is that it was really never available to the public, right? And because it was never available to the public, there's this perception that it's used as a way to hide overspending, okay? And you can make the argument that that's exactly what it is. But my goal is to make sure that the information is out there so it can be very easily seen, and then people can decide for themselves. Is it a good thing or is it not a good thing?
Well, is it possible that these kind of over budget things for DHS would maybe incentivize them to fund them a little bit better in the future?
I'm sure that some legislators will argue that, I think some argue that yes, let's fund it at the appropriate level and hold everybody accountable, and some will argue, well, if you fund it, then they'll overspend that. So, there's an argument on both sides.
Oh.
So
You try to stay out of that, I bet.
I do try to
Yeah.
stay out of that. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to provide the information so that, our tax, because regardless, they're tax dollars. And can you imagine that for 9 years, nobody was able to see what the $2.5 billion that we spent of our taxpayer money?
And so obviously the projections for income and for spending have been off over the last 9 years. And so it should be embarrassing to the appropriations process that not doing that well.
They're probably not embarrassed.
In trying to project that. Well, I'm being nice
You're being very
with
kind.
it.
Yeah.
But I do know when it comes to tax increases, because the thing is you can't budget something unless you have the taxes raised in the revenue projection in order to cover that. So that's sort of the dance, I guess, that they're doing between now, for starting July 1st, and then come to the realization next January that, oh, by the way, so we didn't have to increase taxes. We just projected a low thing that people are going to stop using nursing homes as much, and then pass a fully balanced budget. And so I guess this will be good to see how does this work in the future. Now that it's known that it just seems to be quite a tradition of just doing the same thing over and over again.
I agree, and so I'm really hoping that we can get the public educated. I think, Maura, you went out and looked at the page, and we tried to make it very, very simple to explain what exactly can be on there, why it would be on there, and then you can see exactly what goes through there and why.
And there's a lot of detail. You can open up the document that has the $605 million
Yes.
right now in Medicaid spending, and it gives you a lot of detail.
It does.
So it's pretty fascinating. Are you anticipating any more this year?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you might not be able to say what it is, but we're just starting. So
Yeah, we're just starting. There'll be a lot more that flows through Ledger 5 because there is, every single year for the past 9 years, and I would anticipate it's largely DHS. I do want to mention that, we make every payment, Treasury does. So every payment goes through our office, and we have a pre-audit function. So the other thing we're going to do is give a little bit more scrutiny about what's going through Ledger 5 to make sure it's, truly legitimate.
Do you show a resolution at all? So we've got the $605 million. We talked about it probably being covered by federal payments coming in. Does it fall off then, or do you offer an explanation? Or
Yes.
Okay, so it'll fall off to Ledger 5.
It'll fall off, and there'll be
Okay.
an explanation of why.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
So everybody will be able to.
Yeah.
Everybody will be able to track it.
See, I could be an accountant.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can.
And when we're talking about these, and I know there's only a minute left, but what I would ask you to do is look at the other part of the budgetary process, since we're looking for transparency, is, for instance, with the highway funding, that really it went to state police, you know, in a very, very big way. And now that's going to become very important, you know, for you and the others to watch, because now the federal dollars for the infrastructure bill are coming to fix our bridges that are falling down.
Yes,
which
they
we saw
are.
in Pittsburgh.
Literally.
That we're going to need to have those dollars to attract those federal dollars.
We are.
And that will mean your help in the fact of being able to allow that to go through, that our match will be there. And so that's another thing I just bring up in the last minute.
No, I agree. That's
gonna
a
be
very good
busy.
point.
Well, again, I want an update on this because I'm you know, learning so much. So we'd like to have you back at some point.
I'd love to come back.
We thank you so much
Yes,
for
thank you.
being
Thank
here
you.
today. And thank you, Jerry, for helping with the co-hosting duties here. And we'll be back next time for another edition of Behind the Headlines.